So you can imagine at this point people were a bit astonished by this and a bit frustrated, and it got blogged about quite a lot and it got written about in all sorts of different parts of the world. But the council said, don't worry, when it's launched you'll see that it's money really, really well spent. So they launched it. And most people were at best underwhelmed, and quite a lot of people were really angry. So to pay your local tax, it still seemed to take 6 clicks. The council still organised the information the way it organised itself. It was essentially a slightly shinier version of what we'd had before, but they'd been absolutely had by their contractors. Their suppliers had got them over a barrel and over 4 years exploited every single ounce of uncertainty in the council to get more and more and more money out of them. But the council carried on insisting, as large organisations are prone to do, no, really, we did do a good job. This is a marvellous website. It is money well spent. It couldn't possibly have cost less than £2.8 million or taken less than 4 years to do. And they were so insistent that they were right, as only big organisations seem capable of doing, that they gradually got people more and more and more frustrated. Now think about that stock pot of social capital. We've got these people getting drunk together, we've got these people interviewing each other, listening to each other, blogging together, building relationships. And 2 of them, a chap called Josh Hart and a chap called Steph Lewandowski, got sufficiently frustrated that they spent a couple of days of preparation and they called a hack day. And they got about 30, 40 people in a room in a day, and what they did was they sucked all of the information out of Birmingham City Council's new website and built a new one and squirted all of the information into that. And they did in the best part of a day what Birmingham City Council had tried to do in 4 years and with £2.8 million, but so far failed. Yeah, indeed. You won't be surprised to know that Birmingham City Council's response to this was just to be really, really quiet. They just couldn't think of anything to say that didn't make them look stupid. But this was a product of that stock pot of social capital I'm talking about. This was a product of people doing things together, getting to know each other, building relationships, growing trust. One last example I want to give, which is one that's sort of closer to me than any of the others. Blog Action Day is an American movement where what they do is they ask bloggers to talk about a particular subject on a particular day. And in 2008, the subject for Blog Action Day was poverty. So they said, if you're a blogger, do you mind just writing a blog post on that day about poverty from your perspective? Birmingham is an engineering city and quite a practical place, and people were scratching their head going, well, we're not going to make much difference writing a blog post. What can we do? And there was a lot of discussion about it. And Tom Watson, who happens to be one of the Birmingham bloggers who used to come and get drunk with us, who's an MP, was sort of spurring us on and saying, you know, what are you going to do about Blog Action Day? So we had a bit of a discussion online, and a friend of mine called Pete Ashton had developed this very simple idea to try and save time in his business called a social media surgery. And I came up with the idea of applying that in a different way, which was to run a social media surgery, but for voluntary organisations and community groups. So what the idea was not very complicated. It was to take these 2 networks I developed, these 60 active citizens who'd grown to trust each other and me through social media, the Birmingham Bloggers Group, and put them together. And for the Birmingham bloggers to share what they knew with the people who ran neighbourhood forums or ran campaigns in their community and just share their skills with them. Very, very simple. I had very little time to organise it. I had a week to organise it, so it was going to have to be simple. And I basically ran a friend and said, can I borrow a room, please? Can you provide tea and coffee? And sent out an email to the first group of people from the grassroots channel and sent out information to the Birmingham Bloggers Group and said, please just turn up and just sit next to each other and help each other. And it was only ever supposed to be a one-off. And this really doesn't look very interesting, does it? This really looks very, very boring. But this is the first ever social media surgery. And here are volunteers from community groups sitting next to volunteer bloggers and sharing information with each other. And there's no speaking, there's no curriculum, there's nobody saying you must do this. It is literally somebody sitting next to somebody else and saying, tell me what you're trying to achieve. Tell me what you already know about the internet. Let me show you things that might be interesting to you. And things started to pop up from this. So immediately, within 45 minutes, this was 90 minutes long, within 45 minutes, somebody had helped the Jubilee Debt Campaign set up their first blog. About 10 minutes later, 2 other people had set up some blogs. There were a Facebook group page or 2 that came out of it. Entirely practical. These are practical people sitting next to practical people doing practical things. And what happened was the social media surgery came to an end, and the Birmingham bloggers did what they always do, which is go to the pub. And I had about 10 people in this pub absolutely buzzing, because they've been sitting next to brilliant people who do brilliant things in their community, talking to them and helping them. And they were completely wired by the excitement of what they'd done. And so they said, we need to do that again, by which they meant, can you organise another one, please, Nick? So I did. I organised another one, because they were very easy to organise. And more started popping up. People would get on a train, they'd see we're having a good time on Twitter, so they'd get on a train from elsewhere in the country, they'd come and help us run a social media surgery in Birmingham, they'd have a good time, they'd go back to their hometowns and set up their own, because they were so easy to do. Here's one in a garden in Borsall Heath, which is where I live. Here's one in Lascelles, and just in case you've missed him, there's John Heaven. Sorry, John. And they were deliberately simple. People would say to me, it's a really good idea. What you must do is, you must, before every single session, do a presentation on RSS feeds and make sure that everybody understands. And they tell me all the things that needed to be done to make it better. And I just go, no, I'm not going to do any of those because I'm too lazy. I can't be bothered. If it's not easy to organise, it won't happen. So I kept to these really simple principles, which is basically to make a social media surgery work, you need a free room, free, don't pay for it, free, it can be a cafe. You need a surgery manager, somebody who's willing to book a date. Ideally, you need somebody who will turn up and help and somebody who will turn up to get help. But the most important thing I think you need is the thing at the bottom, which is zero expectations. And this is the opposite of what so many government, top-down driven initiatives are about. They are about setting targets of things you must achieve. My view of this zero expectations is that if I decide to organise a social media surgery and I go to the cafe and I'm sat in the cafe on my own for 90 minutes, so drinking coffee and checking the internet, that's okay. If one other person turns up, that's really good. If half a dozen people turn up, that's brilliant. Because what often kills these things is somebody going, if I don't get 20 people there, I failed. So when 10 people turn up, you still feel like you failed. So having no expectations and keeping it simple, I think is really, really important. And based on zero expectations, we started to grow what was a movement. So here I'll point out these numbers. So this is based on expecting nothing to happen. The red ones mean that there are now surgeries in 99 different places. None of this has been funded, this has just grown by accident. There are surgeries in 7 different countries, including Kathmandu, and the first one in Germany happens in Hamburg tonight. 2,500 people have got involved so far, 500 of those are volunteer surgeons. And, you know, it's just starting to grow based on zero expectations. If somebody had come to me with a budget and said, make that happen, I think it probably wouldn't have happened. My desperation to make it happen would probably have broken it. And as I said, you know, this always makes me smile. So here we got just this week, which doesn't look that grand, but, you know, a social media surgery tonight in Shrewsbury, Stoke-on-Trent and Hamburg. Wednesday, Hume in Manchester and Newcastle in the southeast. Next week, Stourbridge. The BBC is now running one at Media City in Salford. And these, I'm not organising these. They're so simple to organise that people are just making them happen for themselves. And because of that, the people who've been organising these got recognised by the Prime Minister and won a Big Society Award from Downing Street, which is great, really, really good, because it's very encouraging to see a politician looking at something that's genuinely bottom-up and going, oh, that's genuinely bottom-up. And not going, can I control it, just going, well done, carry on. So that was encouraging. But what I found much more encouraging or much more interesting, and I think this relates to all of the things I've talked about, is a friend of mine, Tessie Britton, decided to write a book about, or collate a book about what she calls emergent new community culture. And we can argue about how new this is, but I think the internet is changing the way communities work in quite an interesting way. And she got a lot of people from all over the place to write chapters, and she asked me to write a chapter about how the social media surgeries had come about. And she gave the book to a chap called David Barry, who lives in Leeds, and asked him to read all the chapters and try and summarise what he thought they had in common. And he came up with this phrase that I absolutely love. He described the people who do things like rebuild city council websites, subvert and improve council consultation processes, or create networks of civic activity because they're too lazy to do anything else, as militant optimists. And it's a lovely phrase. It really is a lovely phrase. And this is how he describes militant optimists. He says, militant optimists are high on motivation, low on ready-made roadmaps to get them to their destination, get easily bored with playing strategic war games and distrust marketing. They define their own model. So I suppose the thing to think about is, where are your militant optimists, and can you, or even should you, help them? Thank you.